Hello, I'm DJ Cole. I'm a technical marketing engineer at Cisco. And kind of sort of this presentation is going to focus on some of our new wireless innovations in our industrial space, right? So we have the Cisco Catalyst IW9165 series of wireless client and access points, right? And wireless client is something that you probably haven't heard about in the Cisco kind of catalog. We had a wireless client a long time ago, sort of in the early days of Aeronet, but it's something we're sort of reintroducing into our industrial space with the products that we just launched. So during this section, I sort of called this one riding the waves because I think, a lot of times when we talk about industrial and talk about mobility, a lot of the focus on these new products is for robots and AMRs, AGVs, right? So autonomous guided vehicles, automated guided vehicles. And a lot of times, those robots are sort of what uses our products. So sort of what is industrial wireless at Cisco, right? So we talked about our new innovations in industrial wireless. And when you think about industry and you think about wireless, there's a few different kind of technologies that come to play, right? You have 5G, you have LoRaWAN, you have a number of other ones that are kind of specific to some use cases. But really, when we talk about industrial wireless, it focuses on 802.11 technologies. So in our sort of our current catalog, we have end products. We have products that do AC, and what we're announcing here and what we announced last year is AX-based products, right? So Wi-Fi 6, and we also have 6 gigahertz support on these products, right? So we can get into Wi-Fi 6E, and I'll talk about that a little bit, why I don't want to say Wi-Fi 6E just yet. We support 2 different technologies. We support Wi-Fi, and we support Cisco Ultra Reliable Wireless Backhaul, or I call that CURB. And we're kind of, I won't go into too much detail on those, but all the products that you see here will support one or both of those, depending on which model it is. So in this series, the IW9165 series, we have 2 radios that we announced yesterday actually at Cisco Live. We have the Catalyst IW9165E, and that's this guy. Comes in a very compact form factor. And this was kind of purpose built as a wireless client device, something that connects your devices to a wireless network, whether that be Wi-Fi or that be CURB, really intended for applications like AGVs and AMRs, where size is a constraint, power is a constraint, weight is a constraint, among other things. And then we're also introducing the Cisco Catalyst IW9165D access point, which also supports CURB. And I'll talk about exactly what these support in just a minute. But this was sort of purpose-built for industrial settings where you needed something that had a built-in directional antenna for sort of backhaul, but you can also have another radio for things like mobility or an additional radio for backhaul. And I'll go through these in just a second. I'm actually going to start passing these around in case you guys want to start looking at them. Very cool. Yep, just be careful. They're a little heavy. I was specifically told for this section that I'm not allowed to throw access points. So I won't be doing that.
Really? I was told you were throwing access points, so I was looking forward to it.
So yesterday I did accidentally send an access point flying across the room. It didn't damage anything. I was more worried about the floor than the access point. But as you'll see in a second, as I compare this to the rest of our sort of next-gen portfolio, maybe I'll pass this around in a second. This access point, which is the next one I'll show, is almost 9.5 pounds compared to like 2 pounds for those. So they're a little bit safer. Sorry, that was kind of loud, but it's heavy. So kind of our entire next-gen portfolio, these 2 devices kind of round out that. So during one of the previous Tech Field days, I talked about the IW9167E access point, which is this one. That's sort of the premier access point, and I'll give you the tech specs in just a second. But these 2 kind of complement that, right? So, this is an access point you would use sort of on the fixed side or the infrastructure side of maybe a mobility network or other use case, depending on which industry you're in. And these devices kind of complement that with using the same technology, but a little different form factor and sort of different specs, right? While this is a 4x4 device, so 4 spatial streams, 4 transmit, 4 receive on each radio, both of these devices are 2x2. And that kind of helps control the size, some of the power, and also the weight of the weight, and also eventually the cost of everything inside of it. Between these devices, I mentioned that they support Wi-Fi, CURB, and we also support a workgroup bridge. If you're familiar with workgroup bridge allows you to connect devices to your network, right? So that's kind of the complementary side of your Cisco Wi-Fi network. If you have something like an AGV that you want to connect to your network, you do that with workgroup bridge to connect it to your Wi-Fi. And that's a mode that 2 of these support, the 9165E and the 9167E. And then they all support CURB, and This one right here, which is something we announced previously, that also supports normal Wi-Fi mode. So if you just want like a Cisco Catalyst access point in general in your plant, your factory, you can do that with the 9167E. The reason I say that they're not necessarily Wi-Fi 6E yet is because all of these devices support 60 gigahertz. They have 60 gigahertz built in. But of course, regulations across the world, we've started, we as the world, the globe, different countries, have started with low power indoor access points. This specifically, all of these would classify as a standard power access point under like FCC regulations and in EU with ETSI. So we're still sort of working through the regulations as they get approved. These devices will support whatever they can in terms of 60 gigahertz performance. So some of the features that are kind of specific and kind of unique on the 9165E, which is the one that you're passing around, that's the smaller box. Really kind of first in any of our lineup is all of these radios have GNSS built in, right? So when you're doing mobile things, you can have GNSS for location awareness, helps with your troubleshooting. It also is useful for like AFC services for 60 gigahertz in the future. They all have BLE, so they have an IoT radio built in. Not only can it do not only can it do BLE, but it can also do Zigbee and Thread, multi-protocol in that sense. And this radio, specifically the 9165, also has GPIO built in. And I think GPIO on a wireless client is really unique because our customers came to us and they said, we have these AGVs and a lot of them run on battery or capacitors, and they can't always make it back to their charger, especially when they're programming or they have things like e-stops in a factory. And they need a way that they can control that AGV in terms of power and use less consumption of the power when they're doing that, right? So what they really want is the way to have the radio kind of go into a low power mode and tell them when their system needs to wake back up so they can conserve as much power as possible. So there's GPIO on this device, and that allows them to put their AGV basically to sleep, leave the radio on. They can put the radio into a low power mode where it uses much less power, and then they can send a command to the AP that will tell their AGV to wake up and continue operation. And that process takes, maybe a few seconds, maybe a minute or so for their AGV to wake up, but they don't have to go with an extended period of time, and they can conserve battery and sort of have the best trade-off advantage for them in that type of environment. Along with our curb system or Cisco ultra reliable wireless backhaul, having two radios in one box kind of gives us the advantage of that technology, because we're able to do kind of fast handoffs for things that need really low latency, especially with mobility. And we're also able to do a technology called MPO, or multipath operation, where under curb you can actually use both of those radios to send data across both simultaneously. We actually duplicate that, send it out both radios, and then deduplicate it on the infrastructure side so that you can actually make wireless more reliable than just having one channel of communication at a time. Things like robots, AGVs that can't sustain barely any packet loss, that really helps you, right? Because you can make your network more reliable without having to add any additional hardware. You can have it all in one box. And with the work group bridge mode, I didn't specifically mention it before, but this supports work group bridge, which is kind of specific to a Catalyst or a Cisco infrastructure, but it also supports kind of a submode of that called universal work group bridge, or UWGB, so that not only can you use this with a Cisco infrastructure, but you can actually use this with any third-party wireless infrastructure, right? And then it kind of goes into there's some functionality you lose with that, but you can go ahead and use this device to connect to any wireless network. So if you were to use a device like this, connect it inside your AGV, you'd be able to use the AGV both with Cisco wireless or third party without having to change the box out. Things specific to that larger box, the 9165D, as I mentioned before, it has two radios in it, the same as the other box, but it has that built-in directional antenna, right? So use cases where you need to connect to something remotely and you don't want to put an external antenna, it's already built into that case. And you have the option to have that second radio as well, right? And you can put an external antenna there that's directional for point-to-point type applications or point-to-multipoint. Or you could use that second radio for mobility, right? And with the curb system, you can actually integrate those together. So, imagine you're in like an open pit mine and you have a solar mounted trailer. You're able to put that radio on that trailer and have one link go back to like a central site, and then have that other one be kind of mobile, a mobility network. So other equipment like remotely controlled dozers or autonomous haul trucks, those can actually connect to that mobility network and use it, and you only have one box, right? We could do that before with 2 boxes, but 2 boxes meant more power draw, more things to have to worry about out on your trailers. And these trailers are typically solar powered, so less power draw really helps them at that point. And in most cases, they would have to add a switch there, right? Because they have multiple radios, sometimes 3. And now you're able to have 1 radio, and you can actually have 2 radios, connect them together with no switch, power it via DC, and you haul that all, and you minimize the power draw on that solar panel. Other than that, both of these devices have sort of the temperature range that you'd kind of expect from any of our products. The IP, the smaller one, the 9165E, has a little bit lower just because you're indoor and you're an IP30 enclosure. But with the 9165D, you have that sort of full range that you'd expect. And in this case, that goes up to goes up to positive 70 degrees Celsius all the way down to negative 40. So you kind of have most of the range that you'd expect. If you go below negative 40 and like you send this to space, you would need something like a heater or something in the enclosure to heat it up to negative 40. Although I would not necessarily recommend you take our products to space without a little bit more testing than that. So here's sort of kind of like the technical details between them if you want to like contrast and compare, right? Something I didn't mention previously, this product, which is kind of that top of the line that we announced last year, this has a 5 gigabit per second interface, right? So if you're using all 3 radios, 802.11ax, 4x4, you definitely can start pushing over a gig of traffic pretty easily. So we have that 5 gig interface. With our other 2 products, the 9165 series, both of those have a 2.5 gig interface, sort of the primary interface for PoE. So you can definitely go past that 1 gig, especially with 2x2. You can easily sort of push that on 2 radios. So that's something that's kind of critical to do that. Other than that, from the vibration standpoint, both this device and the smaller device are kind of rated for vibration. Primarily where we see that is things like rail use cases, where you sort of see more of that use case. Here's sort of a comparison slide, although I think I'll pass this one around too so you can see it. Might take all the way around there, but...
DJ, before you jump on, one quick question I had. These are rated to run 6 gigahertz, you said, correct?
Correct, yep.
Are they indoor-only standard power devices, as far as you're aware?
They're outdoor devices, so it depends on which country you're asking the question from, right? But so they are considered outdoor devices, right? So I'll answer that question from the perspective of the US and FCC because they're the furthest along here. So they are outdoor devices, right? And sort of some of the things that really make that an outdoor device, including this device, right? So FCC says anything that has a weatherized enclosure, which isn't necessarily this product, or has external antennas, right? So the external antennas on the 9165E triggers that exception. That makes it a standard power device. So whether or not you're indoor or outdoor doesn't particularly matter in that case. You would need AFC to enable 6 gigahertz on it, right? Which is why we don't have it today.
Okay, and so it doesn't support AFC right now?
No, so AFC isn't necessarily live yet, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yep. On the obviously we're testing it internally on the Wi-Fi side of things. But today, right, if you were to buy it, that's why we say 6 gigahertz ready. It's not Wi-Fi 6E yet. Once we release the AFC service on the Cisco side, then it would be able to be used.
Okay, so that was the point I was wanted to clarify. So it is ready, but not certified for 6 yet.
Correct. Yep.
Or sorry, 6E yet. Okay,
correct.
That makes sense. Thank you.
That's why at the beginning I'm like, this is not necessarily Wi-Fi 6E, but it is 6 gigahertz capable, right? So at least if you buy today, you kind of protect your investment, right? Because you don't want to be deploying something today that isn't 6 gigahertz ready. But when that happens, when we get those certifications and when the regulations are final so that we can get those certifications, then you would be ready to use it with just a software update.
I would be interested in the management of the wireless. So is this centralized or how does it work in you?
So it depends on which model and which technology, right? So, from the top, from the 9167, that supports normal access point mode on the Catalyst side, right? So for management, you would connect it to a WLC, like a 9800 controller, and use DNAC to manage it, just like you would any of your rest of your Cisco equipment. On the curb side, so the Cisco Ultra Reliable Wireless Backhaul side, that's managed separately. So that kind of is, a lot of the management is sort of internal to that. And we have another product called Cisco IoT Operations Dashboard that is going to sort of be the configuration platform for that. So that's a cloud-based service that where you'd be able to manage the curbside. And, I say cloud-based service, but it's not necessarily where you think that they have to be connected to the cloud all the time. It's sort of more of a platform to do that. So, you can imagine with our curb technology, you deploy this a lot in industries that don't want to be connected to the cloud, right? So you're actually able to go online, do all your configuration, and then download a file to those devices, right? And we actually have it called one file where you can say, you need to deploy 100 of these devices. You can go online, template that out, download a file with all 100 of those configurations in one file, and then just deploy that file to all the devices. And that kind of keeps you offline, but still sort of have that cloud managed aspect of it. So we're definitely looking at how do we integrate that with sort of the rest of the Cisco platform, and that's sort of in progress. But today we have that as a separate tool called a separate service in our IoT operations dashboard.
So if I have a complete fleet, I would need more or less both management solution to manage kind of seamlessly the big boxes and the small boxes, yeah?
If you're using Wi-Fi and you're using Curb, then you would need two, right? For each one of those is sort of separate.
And the curve portion, so this big box can do both.
Yep, it can do Curb and it can do Wi-Fi.
Do I need both management suites, or this can be fully managed just by the wireless management control?
Well, I think I should clarify, right? So the large box can either run Wi-Fi or Curb, and
okay.
so you can't run both at the same time, right?
Okay.
So the hardware underneath is exactly the same, right? And so you would buy it. So when you go out and you actually purchase this, you buy it in either Curb mode or AP mode, and it comes with that software preloaded. But it's very easy just with one command to change between them. But you either have that entire access point running in Curb mode or Wi-Fi mode, right? So, and usually the use cases don't necessarily overlap. But if they did, then you would, and you wanted to use that one specifically, then you would have one of those kind of doing the Curb for the backhaul, and you'd have another one doing sort of that, sort of the Wi-Fi aspect of it, right? So you'd have two different boxes, and then you'd manage them separately today.